Hello, everyone. A very logical day to all of you. So, the last day of the month, let's see what you have done in this month, the one that is gone, and try making a resolution, a small one for the next month. Right? Let's see what we have today here. 31st March, the first editorial of the Indian Express. Losing steam, which you should not be losing. अंडरस्टैंड लूजिंग स्टीम का मतलब क्या हुआ स्टीम होता है ना वेयर यू डू समथिंग वेरी पैशनेटली वेरी इंटेंसली करते जाते हैं और लूजिंग स्टीम का मतलब होता है नाउ यू बिकम टायर्ड यू बिकम वियरी एंड देन you feel like not to do. So you need to pick up on that steam again with the first day of the next month, and you should not be losing steam till the last day of the month. Let's see what this is concerned about. देखो हर एक टाइटल हर एक चीज हम पे फिट होती है हमें वही देखना है बस come on a new report by the World Bank has highlighted the faltering faltering prospects. So this was falter, right? Prospects को जब मैंने process कहा तो ये faltering हुआ. So that means something that is becoming false. So you have this word fall, FAL. So, a new report by the World Bank has highlighted the faltering prospects of the global economy and urged policymakers to act urgently. According to the bank's calculations, the global economy's potential growth rate, the maximum rate at which an economy can grow without spiking inflation, is likely to hit a 3-decade low of 2.2% a year between now and 2030, down from 2.6% in 2011 to 21 and 3.5% during the first decade of this century. A series of overlapping crises in the past few years, such as the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine, have weakened almost all the key drivers of long-term economic growth. I've highlighted this word also, all the key drivers of long-term economic growth. In the words of David Malpass, president of the World Bank Group, the result could be a lost decade in the making, not just for some countries or regions, as has occurred in the past, but for the whole world. A lost decade in the making का मतलब हुआ कि इस decade में, decade is 10 years, right? So in this decade, what economic growth should have been, how much it should have been, because of these 3 years of the reduced pace of economic growth, right, it has receded a lot. जो तरक्की होनी चाहिए थी, जो ग्रोथ होनी चाहिए थी, इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ कहां तक पहुंच जाते वो इस कोविड की वजह से लॉकडाउन की वजह से या फॉर मेनी अदर रीजंस इट हैज reduced a lot. So the result could be a lost decade. So the whole decade is lost almost in the making, not just for some countries or regions as has occurred in the past, but for the whole world. So the major point here would be what? Highlighted the prospects, so they need to change, they need to act urgently, one thing, right? And economic growth will be there. This is only an explanation of the economic growth, वो है क्या? और यहाँ पे है data कितना है? ठीक है? Now, this is a series of overlapping crises in the past few years. This is what he mentioned. COVID-19 tha, war in Ukraine, all these have weakened the key drivers. Drivers means, see, who is a driver? Normal language. Driver would be a person who is driving the car, right? A chauffeur. Now, this, in this case, the driver of what? The economic growth. And that to long-term economic growth. तो ऐसा ऐसी कोई चीज जो कि इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ को आगे लेके जाएगी, right? Pulling, influencing, propelling. So they are called the drivers of the economic growth, right? Somebody who is pulling the thing or the country towards the heights of this economic growth. Let's see now what is there in the second paragraph. These drivers have been weakened. ये एक major point हो जाती है. Now, in its report, the bank has shown how all the fundamental drivers of potential growth have been losing power. The same thing what was given in the first paragraph. Be it capital accumulation. Now, see, this is an example of the drivers of economic growth. Capital accumulation through investment growth, growth in labor force, or the growth of total factor productivity, which is the part of economic growth that results from more efficient use of inputs and which is often the result of technological changes. So, technology is a driver, right? During the industrial years, the steam engine was there, no? So that became a driver. The steam, electricity became a driver. Then, when the internet and all this came, right? Computers and internets and also they became the drivers because some factor that is pulling us towards the economic growth. So all these drivers, now यहाँ पे तो drivers आ गए, अब बहुत अच्छे से meaning तुम्हें समझ में आ गया drivers का. All faltered in the past decade, and the bank expects all of them to slow further in the remainder of the current decade. मतलब अभी तक तो वो सारे फॉल्टर हो गए थे, सब स्लो हो गए थे, अभी और आगे आने वाले डिकेड में भी स्लो रहेंगे. What is worse, as the recent bank collapses suggest, these weaknesses could be even more pronounced if financial crises erupt in major economies and especially if they trigger a global recession. Right? These weaknesses will be more pronounced. That means they'll be seen, they'll be highlighted, they'll become more prominent, striking. कुछ भी हो सकता है pronounce का meaning. वो कैसे दिखेंगी? अगर financial crisis erupts in major economies, right? So if there's a financial crisis, see the banks have collapsed, right? Now all this will affect the whole world, the major economies. Now, if there is major economies, in the major economies, there's a financial crisis. This is definitely going to affect other countries. Now, when in the major economies there are financial crisis, this is going to affect the or it is going to bring about a global recession. So trigger means to start or to initiate or to bring about a global recession. Now you see how these things are happening. The drivers of the economic growth are weakened. As a result, what will happen? The economic growth has slowed down. Slowed down, and what is the World Bank saying? That this is going to be in the same condition or rather a worse condition in the coming years. What else is going to happen or what else can happen? So the major economies may face financial crisis. If this happens in this case, what is going to happen now? Recession across the world, right? So you can see that flow now. Now, while slowing growth is bad news for all concerned, it is particularly so for those economies technically called the emerging market and developing economies that are trying to eradicate widespread poverty, tackle climate change, and meet other key development objectives. तो developed economies में अगर problem होती है, financial crisis आता है, so this is going to trigger a global recession. What about those economies which are called the emerging market and developing economies, right? And what are they dealing with? They are tackling what? Eradicating widespread poverty. They are tackling climate change and dealing with key development objectives. Now, from India's perspectives, अभी तक उसने वर्ल्ड के हिसाब से बोला, ओवरऑल के हिसाब से बोला. From India's perspective, there are two ways to read the report. Despite being part of the EMDs, unlike most of them, India is expected to grow faster than other economies. So though India is a part of this EMDE, developing है अभी, right? फिर भी दूसरों से थोड़े एक level higher होगी. Why? Because what is expected is that India should grow faster than other economies. Now, how is all this going to affect India? So a slower global growth also implies that energy costs, that is crude oil and natural gas prices, they will likely remain manageable, and that could be great news for an energy hungry and an energy deficient country. Energy hungry मतलब बहुत ज्यादा उसको पीना है, वो एनर्जी चाहिए, और एनर्जी डेफिशिएंट मतलब अवेलेबल कम है. But the rate, sorry, where was I? Energy costs will likely remain manageable. ठीक है, ये तो छोटा सा एक प्लस साइन है यहाँ. However करके उसने अब कुछ और दे दिया. an all-round global slowdown as well as the reasons prompting it. Geopolitical tensions, reduced openness to trade, policy uncertainty will also make it tougher for India to achieve its growth ambitions. So expected kya hai India se? That India should come up faster than other economies, though it is a part of that EMDE. What is going to happen is this: reduced openness to trade, policy uncertainty, and geopolitical tensions. All these are going to pull its leg back, right? To make it tougher for India to achieve its growth ambitions. Now, there won't be a rising tide of global growth as it was during the high growth phase of 2003-2008 to provide tailwinds. Ab dekho, we have two words here: rising trade, which you can understand with this word high growth phase of during the high growth phase of 2003 to 2008. Right. So rising tide would mean that if the when the tide is rising, it brings with it or takes with it many other things. Right. So here in this case, in economics, this rising tide would be that if there is one driver of economic growth which is bringing about prosperity, it is going to affect the remaining or the other sectors also. So there would be many things which are going to be benefited by it. वो अब नहीं होने वाला है क्यों जो 2003-2008 में हुआ there won't be anything like this because there is no new driver of economic growth. ठीक है ऐसे ऐसे अभी कुछ नया नहीं है जो कि पूरे वर्ल्ड को एकदम से मतलब हिला दे जैसे रेवोल्यूशन होता है ना इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन हुआ था फिर एक कंप्यूटर रेवोल्यूशन हुआ डिजिटल रेवोल्यूशन हुआ सो इन दैट वेज देर इज नो no driver. I'll use the word again, no driver of that economic growth, and this is what the author is saying, that there won't be a rising tide of global growth as it was during the high growth phase of 2003-2008 to provide the tailwinds. For instance, demand for India's exports, a crucial engine of domestic growth, will likely stay muted. So this is an engine of domestic growth. So again, something that is driving you ahead will be the engine. So there is no extra demand for India's exports. ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है जो increase हो जाएगा एकदम से इंडिया ने कुछ बनाया increase हो जाएगा the world markets need it and then India will come back to its position. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. Likely stay muted है कि वो ऐसे ही कम रहेगा. That means India policy makers will have to rededicate themselves to sustained economic reforms. More than anything else, this means boosting the productive capacity of the economy by investing in better physical and as well as social infrastructure. So the last sentence is again giving you what the author suggests will be best for the policy makers to do. And this was what he had said in the first sentence, that he had urged the policy makers to act urgently. Right? Why? Because of this slowdown in the economic growth. How is this slowdown in the economic growth affecting the world? What might happen? What can happen? And how is it affecting India? Sure. That was the whole take of the whole of the passage. Now, if you have understood this much, you come to the main idea. An all-round global economic slowdown, हमने जो first paragraph में पढ़ा, will make it tougher for India to achieve its growth ambitions. All-round global economic slowdown हो रहा है was given in the first paragraph. Second paragraph, it showed its impact. Right? This was in the first point, which we had underlined And make it tougher is giving you in the second para. Right? The impact that was being showed. So combining the 2 points, you get the central idea. That's it. I hope you are able to do this in all the passages that you're reading, that you're practicing, no matter what subject matter it is, no matter what topic it is based on. कुछ भी हो, उसका मेजर पॉइंट रहेगा ही सही. क्यों? क्योंकि ऑथर के पास पॉइंट, रीजन, एग्जाम्पल होता ही है. This is what he is going to give you. What he is conveying becomes the point. What he gives, the rationale, the reasoning, That you need to understand when he gives you the data and all. And slowed economic growth, the policymakers are being urged to act urgently. This was in the first. Slowed economic growth going to affect the countries all over the world. For example, in India, how is India going to be impacted? So, mentioning of India was an example to show that the slowed economic growth is going to affect the countries. ठीक है अब थोड़ा सा ऑथर के हिसाब से समझो दिस विल बी अगेन द concluding point. So this is how you need to actually filter out all whatever you are reading. Try applying it to other passages also. Come on, let's see the vocabulary that we have here. Faltering is unsure, wavering, undecided. I gave you that fall means false. तो कहीं पे भी कुछ भी गड़बड़ हुई थोड़ा सा मिस्टेक हुआ मतलब वो फॉल्टरिंग अनश्योर हो गया वेवरिंग मतलब वेव के जैसे जाना एंड अनडिसाइडेड prospect may now you have another root word that is spect and spect means to see. So future prospects most of you have seen brighter prospects bright prospects right. So vision viewpoint आगे की जो होगा सोचते हैं वो प्रो यानी फ्यूचर कहीं कहीं पे इसका मीनिंग फ्यूचर के लिए आता है अहेड के लिए आता है राइट सो समवेयर नॉट ऑलवेज सो प्रो इफ इट इज टू सी अहेड एंड स्पेक्ट इज टू सी सो इट विल बी अ विजन अ व्यू पॉइंट स्पाइकिंग इस केस में इंक्रीजिंग इन्फ्लेशन का नाम था मतलब का मीनिंग था उसका और डैश मैंने इसलिए कहा था कि डैशिंग अगर करते तो यू वुड रिलेटेड टू से डैशिंग like very smart and all. So यहाँ पे dash I wrote why because dash is to go with great speed, right? That is. मतलब he dashed to the airport. मतलब एकदम तेजी से गया. Crisis, I have written this word, and if those who have not seen the previous, the initial explanations that I was taking here in the recordings, so crisis is a plural. I therefore mentioned this here, and crisis as with an I is singular. Many a times what happens कि हमें छोटी छोटी errors कभी आती है कभी कोई grammar का question है या कुछ है तो crisis with an I is singular and crisis with an E is plural. Same thing will be applied to the word axis, AXIS or AXES, singular and plural. Why am I mentioning this is because there have been many people recently और जो सुनेंगे और जो उस क्लास में थे उन्हें याद भी आएगा कि ये एक्सिस और ये एक्सिस का अपने मीनिंग कुल्हाड़ी कर लिया था ठीक है तो हमें समझ में आना चाहिए पैसेज के हिसाब से ये द कुल्हाड़ी की बात हो रही है या एक्सिस के प्लोरल की बात हो रही है सो दिस इज सिंगुलर एंड दिस इज प्लोरल राइट सेम थिंग अप्लाइज विद द वर्ड एनालिसिस with an I and analysis with an E. Right? So a little more focus on the words, that's all we need. Key drivers में key का meaning होता है something that is very important, crucial, strategic. Drivers I have given you, explained you. It is provides impulse or motivation. Pronounced, more evident, more prominent, more noticeable. That is pronounced. ठीक है ना प्रोनाउंस का सीधा वर्ड मीनिंग तो सभी को आता है but this is the contextual meaning now. Trigger is to initiate. I had given you the word initially, I had given you the word initiate, start. एक बार मैंने तुम्हें augment वर्ड भी दिया है अगर तुम नोट्स चेक करते हैं if you are taking notes you will understand augment का मतलब होता है start and these are the words that I have given you. So today I gave you two more words that is elicit. राइट एंड जनरेट समझ में आ जाता है एक्टिवेट भी सिंपल है तो अब आज के लिए तुम एलिसिट लिख सकते हो राइजिंग टाइड improvement in one benefits all that will be the easiest way how to understand it and how to retain it also as I told you ki tide when the tide rises it is going to take many things along with it तो अगर टाइड ऊपर जा रही है तो बाकी की चीजें भी उसके साथ जाएंगी तो अगर एक सेक्टर इंप्रूव कर रहा है इट्स ग्रोइंग सो इट इज गोइंग टू अफेक्ट द अदर सेक्टर्स आल्सो Some way or the other, others are going to be affected in this manner. Tailwind will be a force or influence that pushes towards improvements. ठीक है, तो राइजिंग टाइड तो है, लेकिन टेल विंड्स भी अगर इधर राइजिंग टाइड्स हो जाती है तो इधर टेल विंड्स हो जाएंगे. ठीक है, कि जाते जाते भी वो थोड़ा सा पुश कर लेंगी. So force or influence that pushes towards improvements. Once it starts, there are the tailwinds that are helping it. So I hope you have understood it a little better than what you have read. So that's all for today. Thank you and have a good reading experience in the coming months. Thank you.